I have been preaching about and discussing the scientific basis for the use of DHT gel in the context of a TRT protocol. Because in the end, boys, listen, DHT does the two things that we want to have happen and that we want it to do. It's like the secret weapon on TRT, which is add more DHT and control estrogen. The benefits of that obviously are stronger, firmer erections that last longer, and of course, the balancing of estradiol. Question really is, people are confused about dosing, so I'm going to clear this up. Regarding the 20% DHT gel, it's really like an oil base. You can find it on source lists. Number one, how much should you dose? Number two, how much DHT is in one drop? This comes in a dropper vial. How much DHT are you getting? Number three, how much does that increase the serum DHT? And number four, what does that do to sexual function? Adding DHT, especially the 20% stuff, to a TRT protocol is not a sledgehammer. It is a fucking scalpel. And in this video, alongside that notion, I want to give you precise clarity on exactly how much to use, what it's going to do to DHT, how much you need to counterbalance estradiol, how much is too much, so that you can make intelligent decisions on the use of DHT with your TRT protocol to dial in libido and erections, boys. Sit back, strap in, grab a beer. We're breaking it all down. Let's get into it. All right, before we start the video, guys, look, Cortex Labs, which is my company, is a TRT guidance, sexual dysfunction resolution, performance optimization company. The two major things I want to tell you before we start the video is, number one, coaching is still 50% off. This is one-on-one protocol architecture geared toward fixing libido and erection issues on TRT or for the use of hair loss drugs, optimizing erectile quality, libido, sensation, climax, the whole gamut. This is what I do. Right now, coaching is 50% off, saves you $1,000. Use the code Coach Discount. Enter it at checkout. It will deduct thousands of dollars from the total. This is going away soon. These slots are booking fast. Book down below at livecortex.com. Source list, any anabolic you can think of, including high-potency DHT gel, which we're going to talk about in this video. 30% off right now. The code is on the screen. Links down in the description of this video. Go support us, but get great stuff in the meantime. Okay, so the bottom line is this. DHT is a scalpel. It is the most surgical, powerful weapon that we could be using on a TRT protocol. The fact that it isn't prescribable in the States and available in the States, like to use alongside TRT protocol, is a tragedy, in my opinion. Out of the compounds, ancillaries that we can use with TRT, Masteron, Primo, HCG, Proviron, powdered DHT, oral DHT, Cialis, DHT gel, this is the 20% stuff, is the best add-on we could ever ask for. Because again, it's doing the two things that make a TRT protocol, which is add more DHT, strengthens the endothelial function of the penis, super optimizes erectile quality, rigidity, erection time, but also sensation, climax, and climax sensation. But at the same time, balances E2. It can block estrogen at the gene expression side, and it can also downregulate the genes that encode aromatase enzymes, making you make less of them. So that's why it's super useful. Question really becomes, how much DHT in the 20% dropper vial that I'm referring to here, which again, you can find at source list down in the description of this video, do you actually need to make a difference? And you can answer that question by asking, how much DHT in terms of milligrams is in each drop of the dropper vial, the 20% DHT gel? Question you might want to ask once you figure that out, which we're going to figure out now, is how much does one drop or any number of drops increase estimated serum DHT concentrations? And how much does that benefit erection quality and block estrogen? So this is what I did. All right, I went to chat and I said, with 20% DHT gel in a dropper vial, how much DHT are you getting in milligrams per one drop? This is what you have to know before even touching this stuff. And how much does serum DHT rise in response to each drop? Estimated. I'm asking it to make an estimation. And how much serum DHT increase is needed to counterbalance E2 and help erection quality, sensation, and libido on a modest TRT protocol of 100 to 120 milligrams per week. All right, let's break this down, okay? This is the guts of this video. How much DHT per milligram for milligrams are in a drop of 20% DHT oil? You guys can study this if you want, but a 20% concentration means 200 milligrams of DHT per milliliter. Okay, on these vials, there is actually a measurement, a set of measurements here, and 1 milliliter is part of those measurements. So if you pull out a milliliter of that and you're looking at the dropper thing and it says, you have enough DHT up to the milliliter mark, you're getting 200 milligrams of DHT with that dose. Typical oil-based droppers yield 20 to 25 drops per milliliter. That is about accurate. Now we're going to use 20 drops per milliliter for a conservative calculation. 200 milligrams divided by 20 drops. This equals 10 milligrams of DHT per drop. So the ultimate answer is, per drop of this 20% stuff, how much DHT are we getting? We're getting 10 milligrams of DHT per drop from a 20% solution. So think about that. 10 milligrams of DHT. Is that enough? Does that make a difference? How much does that increase the serum DHT? That would give us that answer. Let's look at an estimation. Okay, so how much does each drop increase serum DHT? Well, it depends on a few factors. The site of application, scrotal being the most effective. And listen, sometimes you might need to apply it to the penis for local androgen receptor activation for repair purposes when you've had down direction for a considerable period of time. But otherwise, scrotal application is the best application of the DHT gel. All right, I'll make that statement. Please remember that statement. This also depends on skin permeability. Scrotal skin is highly vascularized, meaning lots of blood vessels. So that's the most permeable location on your body that you could be putting transdermal DHT. Now, what chat did is it pulled data on scrotal application. So these are studies based on scrotal application of androgens. And what it says is that 5 to 10 milligrams, again, 1 drop, a half drop to 1 drop of scrotal DHT can increase serum DHT by 200 to 500 nanograms per deciliter, depending on timing and absorption efficiency. The reference range for adult males on DHT is 30 to 85 nanograms per deciliter. The low end of this suggested estimate is 200 nanograms per deciliter. You're going supraphysiologic in DHT, according to this estimate, no matter what, with just 1 drop of the 20% DHT. So the estimate, this is where it gets crazy. 1 drop or 10 milligrams applied to the scrotum of DHT gel, the 20% stuff, can increase DHT by 300 to 500 nanograms per deciliter, with upper end absorbers being possibly 700 to 800 nanograms per deciliter. That is wildly supraphysiologic. This is what I mean when I say to folks, because my experience sort of showed me this before I even understood the concentrations, that you don't need a lot of 20% DHT gel to get a substantial effect. And by the way, because it's so much, it's so potent, the shit lasts for absolutely ever. Knowing that 1 drop is about 10 milligrams of DHT, which is enough based on these estimates of how much increase in serum DHT you're actually going to get, you have to ask the question, how much serum DHT is needed to counterbalance estrogen and also to optimize libido and EQ? I've been screaming this from the rooftops, and I will continue to scream this. DHT supports erectile quality in a variety of different ways, supporting erection firmness via endothelial nitric oxide and neural nitric oxide synthase, as well as optimizing veno-occlusive function, antagonizes estradiol's negative sexual effects, especially when E2 is high normal. High DHT supports sensory sensitivity, penile tissue maintenance, libido, and even dopamine activity. All those things are true, but what I want you guys to pay particular attention to is sensory sensitivity. Make no mistake, DHT is the driver of your sensation, your penile sensation. Do not forget that. Now, I'm not sure I entirely agree with this, but for the sake of the argument, at least to discuss this, chat thinks that the ideal DHT to E2 ratio is typically in the range of 8:1 to 12:1 for strong sexual function, meaning E2 at 30 picograms per milliliter, which is what you should shoot for on any TRT protocol, period. For men that are on TRT or testosterone replacement therapy, you'd want DHT around 300 to 400 nanograms per deciliter minimum, ideally 500 to 600 nanograms per deciliter plus. Now look, that is a pretty extreme suggestion. I have seen very good sexual function with DHT at the top of the range. You're talking about 95, just a little bit super physiologic. You're going to get substantial benefits at that point. Above that point, you're still going to get benefits as long as it doesn't block estrogen too much, but then you run the risk of potential hair loss, maybe a little lowering of SHBG, which really shouldn't matter all that much, but ultimately things like acne and oily skin, and you don't necessarily want that. Now, here's the other thing. Looking at a protocol, so we tried to kind of map out a protocol on Chat's idea of, again, my range of test, 100 to 120 milligrams of test a week. It goes, many men have TT or total T at 700 to 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. That's accurate. Many men have estradiol at 25 to 45 picograms per milliliter on 100 to 120 milligrams of test a week. That's also pretty accurate. Again, there's variability between people, but that's accurate. Now it says DHT, though, on 100 to 120 milligrams of test a week should be 150 to 250 nanograms per deciliter. I've not really seen that to be the case. Usually on those doses, DHT is between like 50 and 85 nanograms per deciliter, which would create more of a reason and support the argument to use transcranial DHT 20%, because then you're bumping it where you need it to be for super optimized sexual function without blunting E2, which is just in the super physiological territory, but not super physiological. So here, let me move this up a little bit. The final summary here is that 1 drop of 20% DHT gel is going to equal about 10 milligrams of DHT. Probably going to raise the serum. You know, my estimate would be 100 to 500 nanograms per deciliter, but Chat thinks 300 to 500 nanograms per deciliter. That is a big increase in serum DHT. To counterbalance E2, greater than 30 picograms per milliliter in optimized libido and erections, aim for 500 to 700 nanograms per deciliter serum DHT. Again, I think you can be at 100 to 200, maybe even 300. You're still going to have substantial benefit from that. 1 drop may be sufficient. 2 drops max per day if needed for full symptomatic resolution. Again, the caveat to keep in mind is if you dose too much DHT, it's going to have an AI-like effect, an aromatase inhibitor-like effect, and that's going to block estrogen enough, which is going to mute and blunt libido. This is why, again, I'll enforce for like the 8th time in this video, you don't need a lot of this shit and you don't want to dose it too high. So practical applications here, let's just think about some protocols, okay? So if you're on 150 milligrams of test, you're splitting that up into, call it every other day injection. So, you know, the estradiol is probably going to be up there. It's likely going to be in the 45 to 65 picograms per milliliter range at that dose, especially if you're using some HCG. 1 drop of DHT per day is going to increase the DHT a lot, and that might counterbalance the estradiol, give you enough DHT. Well, it certainly will do that. And that could just balance out your protocol completely. Sometimes people don't even recognize they're 1 drop of DHT away a day on the scrotum from being dialed in. I've seen this happen before, and this can happen to you. However, at those higher doses tests, what I've seen is that when estrogen is substantially over range, it really doesn't matter how much DHT you have past a certain threshold of estradiol. That estradiol is really creeping up there, and you're especially sensitive to estrogen. You can have some pretty high DHT, and it's not going to balance it completely, so you won't be fully dialed in. This is why I always suggest if you can't take an AI at higher doses and get the estrogen in the right place for you, at which point then you could use some DHT and you'd be good, you just have to stick to the lower doses. So at 150 milligrams a week, are you pushing it there? I'd say the likelihood of total success is less just because you're going to have higher estrogen. You know if that DHT is going to balance that estrogen. But you should still try it if you're trying to retain anabolism and energy and all the other benefits that come with higher doses of testosterone. But keep in mind, you might have to dose 2 drops a day. You know, just more than a drop. And the more you go up in DHT, you run the risk of hair loss and acne, which is why it makes a lot more sense, in most cases at least, to just go down in dose in testosterone to between 100 and 120 milligrams. Let's take that, for example. Let's take the high end of that. 120 milligrams testosterone. You're injecting that daily, okay? Every day in the upper glute, 5/8 inch needle, you know, intramuscularly. Therefore, because there's less peaks in estradiol, you're going to have less estrogen anyway. The estrogen probably going to fall with a little bit of HCG and DHA in the 20 on the low end to like 35, maybe 40 picograms per milliliter max. Now, at that area of estradiol, one drop of DHT, which again is 10 milligrams, it could raise the serum 200 to 500 nanograms per deciliter of DHT. There, you are a lot more likely to have success in both managing estrogen and therefore improving erectile quality. That extra DHT added to the penis, the endothelial, the nitric oxide synthase, all that expression that facilitates erections might just be enough, considering estrogen's pretty controlled at that point, for you to notice the difference in those areas. Again, DHT optimizing erectile function can sometimes be blunted when estrogen's too fucking high. So if you're down at those lower end doses, but still sufficient doses, and estrogen is reasonably close to your range, and then you add some DHT, you're gonna have a lot more probability of success than on 150 milligrams or above of test per week. Now, I'll give you one last example. Say you have figured out through titrating down and looking at blood, so you have real data, that 105 milligrams a week of test, and you inject every day, it's like 15 milligrams or 14 and a half milligrams, something like that per day, with a low dose HCG, 100 IU per day, 20 milligrams DHA, your estrogen falls at 25 or 27 picograms per milliliter, which for a lot of people is very reasonable with that dose and that frequency. Just an aside for folks to take away, hopefully. Then if erection quality and libido are pretty good, but could be better, but either way, you want to see if it could be substantially better, you have now an even higher chance of getting a profoundly beneficial outcome from the use of just one drop of DHT transcrotally per day, because estrogen's already in range. DHT is a non-aromatizable androgen. It's not going to increase more estradiol. It's not going to do anything to estradiol in a negative fashion. Probably inhibit it a little bit, but not enough to make a huge difference. But you're just going to load up, the tissues with DHT. There, you are a lot more likely to have a positive erectile sensation, libido, climax sensation, optimization response than on, again, higher doses of testosterone where there's more aromatizable substrate and therefore more estradiol. In effect, I'm applying this strategy, and a lot of my clients are applying this strategy, but we're using test cream for that. A modest increase in estradiol, maybe 5 picograms per milliliter on top of baseline, low dose of test, but with enough convertible androgen into DHT that it totally supercharges the sexual system. Like I wake up with wood every day. I'm horny most of the day, and sensation's great. Like I'm completely dialed in, and I'm pretty anabolic. So, I mean, you could do it either way, but if you're really talking about using a scalpel, like the most surgical intervention for increasing DHT and balancing estradiol on TRT, it would be with the 20% DHT gel. The only reason I'm using cream at this point is just for a little more test and a little more anabolism, right? As to still not knock estrogen over the range. And I like it. I like the energy. I'm applying 5 milligrams a day in the morning of transcrotal cream, and I like that noticeable fucking bump in energy, man. DHT will do that to an extent, but, test is also pretty anabolic and pretty fucking awesome. Now, when you look at this, you've got the full picture. A drop a day. Maybe a drop every other day, because, again, it's 10 milligrams. Maybe you need a little less than that. That equals 10 milligrams of DHT, and that is enough. Now we know a projection, an estimate of how much that can increase serum DHT. We're talking about hundreds of nanograms per deciliter when the ref range is 30 to 85. Boys, it is the best tool we can use. Again, it's in source list down in the description of this video. And now you've got a more clarity on what it's going to do, how many milligrams per drop, and how much increase in serum DHT you're projected to get from that. So ultimately, you can just dial in easier with this information. That's the point of this channel. That's the point of the content that we put out. And I hope that's been fucking useful for you brothers. All right, again, as I said in the beginning, this is what I do. If you need to hire me, if you want to skip all the BS and you don't want to go at it alone, coaching is 50% off right now. This is one-on-one coaching with me. We're together for a month, 3 months, 6 months, or more, depending on what you get. The greatest part about the one-on-one protocol architecture for libido and erections on TRT, as well as with the use of hair loss drugs and sexual dysfunction, is that it's 50% off. You add whatever package you've been eyeing to your cart. You enter the code COACH discount as you see in the graphic on the top of the screen, and watch the total will reduce by thousands of dollars. So some of the stuff that you guys have been thinking about booking, some of you were just kind of on the fence about it, it's now thousands of dollars off. You're saving thousands of bucks. Go book now. There are limited slots on this available. And again, people are closing off other sessions from previous coaching sessions. But I'm gaining a lot of new clients, and there's going to be a point at which I just can't take anymore. And then the prices go back to normal, thousands of dollars more than they will be at this discount. Go livecortex.com. Go book me. The moment you do, we're on the fact-finding call as soon as the next day or that day. And after that, brother, Geronimo, we start. Source list. Regarding the 20% DHT gel, this is where you can find it. It's down in the description of this video. It's an instant download. You could go get it and have it shipped to your doorstep literally in a day. So go get it. It's 30% off right now. Code's on the screen and down in the description of this video. Most valuable product we have besides coaching. Mastering Testosterone Cypionate is a video course I created to dial in libido and erections on that ester, which is particularly hard. I break it all down. It's an hour and 5-minute video course. You're going to want to get it if you're on Cypionate and you don't want to do anything else. livecortex.com. All right. Brothers, that there, what we just did is now like that is this the conclusion. God, how should I do this here? The video's over. Thanks for watching, boys. Hope you're having a great day. Please do me 2 favors. Like the video. Number 1, makes a huge difference in the algorithm. And then number 2, sub to the channel if you're new to this channel. Many more breakdowns on this in the past and forever in the time continuum. I'd love to have you on board as a subscriber. Otherwise, kick ass, rock on. Hope you enjoyed your weekend. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Much more content coming soon. Again, 50% off coaching. Book now. That is ending very soon. And boys, I'll talk to you on the next one.